The day the judge signed the papers, I felt something inside me go quiet. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet. Rhett didn't look at me when we stood up to leave the courtroom. He adjusted his cufflinks like this was another business meeting, like 12 years of marriage had been nothing more than a contract he was done with. I remember staring at the back of his head and realizing I didn't recognize the man I had defended for so long. Outside, the air was cold and dry. I had nowhere to go except a short-term rental I'd booked the night before. 2 suitcases sat in the trunk of my car. Everything else, furniture, framed memories, the life we built, was staying with him. I drove without turning on the radio. The silence felt honest. When I reached the apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my hands. They were steady. That surprised me. I thought I would be shaking, crying, begging the universe to rewind time. Instead, I felt something different. If he believed this was the end of my story, he didn't know me at all. And for the first time that day, I let myself think, maybe losing everything was the only way I'd finally see who I really was. When I first met Rhett, he felt like stability. I had grown up in a house where doors slammed and bills went unpaid, where nothing lasted long enough to feel safe. Rhett was the opposite. He planned ahead. He spoke calmly. He always seemed in control. Being with him felt like stepping into solid ground after years of standing on something shaky. When we started the landscaping company, it felt like building a future with our own hands. I handled the calls, the invoices, the contracts. I liked talking to clients and organizing numbers. Rhett preferred being outdoors, managing crews and equipment. We worked well together, or at least that's what I believed. People used to tell us we were a strong team. We were busy, growing, and always exhausted in that proud kind of way. Looking back, I can see the small changes. Rhett would slide documents across the table and say it was easier if everything stayed under his name. He told me it would simplify taxes and protect us from risk. I didn't argue. I trusted him. He also started questioning the people I talked to. He said some contacts weren't necessary, that I didn't need outside opinions. Even my friendship with Marin slowly became something he criticized. I thought compromise meant loyalty. I thought trust meant silence. The woman who handed me the envelope wouldn't meet my eyes. She asked for my name, confirmed it, and walked away. I stood there in the office lobby, still holding a client file in my other hand, feeling like the floor had shifted under me. I took the papers into my office and closed the door. My chest felt tight, but my mind was clear. Page after page, I read through legal language that felt cold and distant. Dates stood out to me. Signatures. Transfers. Changes I didn't remember agreeing to. The timeline told its own story. While we were having dinner together, while we were planning next season's contracts, while he was telling me everything was fine, he had already been separating me from the life we built. That evening, I went home and asked him directly. I didn't yell. I just asked why. He leaned back like he had been waiting for this moment. There was no guilt on his face, no hesitation. He spoke like someone explaining a simple fact. When he finished, I understood something clearly. This wasn't sudden. It was calculated. And for the first time, I realized I had been standing beside a stranger. The hearings dragged on for months. Every session felt like standing still while someone slowly erased my name from my own life. Dalton Creel spoke in a calm, steady voice, presenting documents and timelines like they were simple math. According to the records, everything belonged to Rhett. The signatures were there. Mine included. I sat there listening, realizing how neatly it had all been arranged. When it was over, there was no dramatic ending. Just a final decision and a quiet room. I packed what was left of my things into 2 suitcases and loaded them into my old sedan. $3,000 sat in my bank account. That was all I had to start over. The rental outside Spokane was small and plain. Beige walls, thin carpet, a single window facing a parking lot. The first night, the silence pressed in on me. No phones ringing. No crew updates. No shared plans. His words repeated in my mind, trying to settle in like truth. But the more I thought about the past few years, the more something felt off. The biggest contracts had started with my conversations. Suppliers had called my number first. When I stopped showing up, employees followed. A quiet realization began to grow. Maybe I hadn't lost my worth. Maybe I had only lost the name it was filed under. Marin showed up on a rainy Thursday evening with takeout and a look on her face that told me she wasn't there to let me fall apart. She walked into my small apartment, looked around once, and sat down at the tiny kitchen table like this was just another normal night. She listened while I talked. I expected pity. Instead, she asked questions. Direct ones. Who handled the contracts? Who built the vendor relationships? Who fixed problems when clients threatened to walk away? I answered without thinking. Then she said something that stayed with me long after she left. She told me I hadn't been erased. I had only stepped back. That night, I opened my laptop and started going through old files I had saved. Emails. Drafts. Proposals. I read through negotiations I had handled, pricing structures I had designed, payment plans I had created to keep clients loyal. The evidence was clear. The business had grown because of decisions I made every day. For the first time since the divorce, I felt steady. What I knew, what I could do, what I understood about people and systems, none of that had been taken from me. And I began to understand something simple. If I built it once, I could build again. I didn't rush. I didn't announce anything. I started quietly. I registered a small consulting firm under my own name. The paperwork felt different this time. Every line, every detail, every signature was mine alone. I wasn't going back into fieldwork. I understood now that my strength had never been the trucks or equipment. It had been structure. I designed service packages focused on improving how small landscaping companies ran their operations. I created step-by-step systems for bringing in new clients, tightening vendor contracts, and organizing internal processes so money didn't leak through careless decisions. At first, I worked from my kitchen table. I reached out to a few former clients, carefully and professionally. I didn't speak badly about Rhett. I simply offered to review their current contracts and show them where they could save money or increase profit. Some agreed out of curiosity. Others remembered how I used to solve problems. Results spoke louder than anything else. One contract turned into 3. 3 turned into referrals. Within a year, I was traveling for meetings in neighboring states, advising companies larger than ours had ever been. I heard through industry contacts that Rhett's projects were delayed. Vendors were less flexible. Clients weren't renewing as easily. He had kept the image. I had taken the foundation with me. I found out by accident. I was at a supply meeting when 2 contractors behind me started talking about unpaid invoices and legal notices. When I heard Rhett's company name, my body went still. They mentioned delayed payments, vendors filing complaints, and projects that had been paused without explanation. Later that week, another contact confirmed it. There was a formal investigation into outstanding debts. Suppliers were demanding what they were owed. Some crews had walked off job sites after checks didn't clear. I didn't feel the rush of satisfaction I once imagined. I just listened. Over time, more pieces fell into place. Long-term clients had chosen not to renew their contracts. Without stable agreements, income became unpredictable. Costs rose because negotiations were no longer tight. Small mistakes stacked up into large problems. Then I heard the house was listed for sale. The same house I had once cleaned, decorated, and planned a future in. I drove past it one afternoon without stopping. The lawn looked untrimmed. The sign stood near the curb. I expected anger. I expected triumph. Instead, I felt distance. His life was unraveling on its own. And for the first time, I understood that true revenge wasn't action. It was survival without collapse. The expo hall was crowded and loud, filled with booths, banners, and sales pitches. I was reviewing a presentation schedule when I heard my name spoken in a voice I hadn't heard in 2 years. I turned, and there he was. Rhett looked different. His suit hung looser on his frame. The sharp confidence he once carried had softened into something uncertain. For a brief second, we just looked at each other like strangers trying to place a memory. He stepped closer and said he hadn't expected to see me there. His eyes scanned the badge around my neck, reading the company name printed under mine. I watched the realization settle in. He admitted he had misjudged me. The words came out carefully, like he had practiced them. I answered calmly. I told him he hadn't misjudged me. He had misjudged the work itself. There was a pause. Then he shifted the conversation toward possibilities. Working together again. Combining strengths. Starting fresh. I listened without reacting. As he spoke, I noticed something clear inside myself. No anger. No longing. No urge to prove anything. Just stillness. When I finally excused myself for my next meeting, I walked away steady. And that was the moment I knew I had already won. The news came in a short industry bulletin. Red had filed for bankruptcy protection. There was no public statement, no dramatic announcement. Just a formal notice and a list of affected contracts. One of those contracts caught my attention immediately. It was a large commercial maintenance agreement with a regional property group. I remembered the first time we had discussed it years ago. He had told me it was too complex for me to fully grasp. I had stayed quiet back then. Now the contract was open for legal bidding. I reviewed the numbers carefully. The structure was flawed, but the potential was strong if managed correctly. I prepared a detailed proposal, focusing on efficiency, cost control, and long-term stability. When the decision came through, the contract was awarded to my firm. It wasn't personal. It was strategic. Over the next year, my company expanded into additional states. I hired analysts and project managers. I was invited to speak at regional trade conferences about improving operational systems and protecting business ownership. When I stood at those podiums, I didn't talk about my past. I didn't mention failure or betrayal. I spoke about building foundations that can't be quietly taken away. And I meant every word. 3 years passed faster than I expected. The day I signed the papers for my new home, I stood alone in the empty living room and let the quiet settle around me. This silence felt different from the one in that small rental years ago. This one felt earned. Every wall, every payment, every decision carried my name. My company now operated in multiple states. I had a team I trusted and systems that worked without chaos. My income was steady. My future was stable. No one else's signature controlled it. Sometimes people asked if I regretted anything. I don't. He kept the old house. He kept the original company name. He kept the accounts that once defined our life together. What he couldn't take was what actually built those things. He couldn't take my ability to see problems before they grew. He couldn't take my discipline. He couldn't take the strength I found when I had nothing left to stand on. Looking back, I understand something clearly. He thought winning meant possession. I learned winning meant ownership of myself. When he walked away believing he had taken everything that mattered, he never realized the most valuable part was never his to begin with. And that was the difference between us.